I'm all twisted up. Wait a minute. You're right. This is the wrong lecture for this class, right? Yeah, I'm supposed to be doing. Today is. Oh my God. See what happens? That's why don't take drugs, guys. Drugs throw you off. Okay, let's start all over again. I'm sorry. All right, let's go back. I'm jumping ahead to tomorrow night's lecture, which is Wednesday night. Okay. Boy, this has never happened to me before. Okay. It's not very professional, Doctor Wright. Okay, I'm talking to myself right here. So let's get to the right class. All right, Doctor Wright, let's do this the right thing tonight. This is the class. Okay? So this class is for those of you who are bachelor completers, who are in the bachelor program. I feel so embarrassed. Oh my God. I'm I just, anyway, be aware of the fact this is not one of my prize lectures. So anyway, I appreciate it. So the same thing applies to this. Rubrics are important. So anyway, so your initial posts are due tonight. Well, that other class I was right about it too. Yeah, I do tonight. So, but every Tuesday, beginning on the 7th of January, we've had lectures. So here's week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and I don't know why I didn't. I thought I fixed that. Put that over there. I don't like things undone. I really don't. That's including for yours truly. I set the pace. All right. Oh, there it is. It is over there. I don't know why it's over there on the page like that. But anyway, I emailed you the link. So you have the lectures for weeks 1 through 4, and this belongs somewhere. Isn't over. I don't know why this is not over here. I didn't mean to hit that. That's the old lecture. Okay. All right. So anyway, we're at lecture 5. So actually, you guys have 2 more lectures. So I'm sorry, you guys see me again one more time. So today is week 5. So let's look at the announcement now. Okay. So yes, you are Melda were correct. Thank you so much. The right to know will be presented. So we'll talk about that. The Trayvon Martin trial, the media, the jury, and the high-profile defendant, a defense perspective on the media circus. That's always right down my alley because that's where I spent most of my career as a defense attorney. As you guys know, I covered a lot of stuff. The Trayvon Martin case, I didn't cover much media, but I talked about it in the classes I taught. So Trayvon Martin, the media coverage of Trayvon Martin case, discussion post, and then finally your impartial trials and course project, the 2 assignments. So your course project final paper is due. So there are a few people who have reached out to me in the last week to ask me. They can't get any responses back from people, and what do they do at this point? I couldn't tell you what to do at this point because this is it. There are so many ways that this could have been done. I presented those during the first week in anticipation of the problem that you have. But you know what? I don't get it because I guess because in Chicago, I mean, I know a lot of people, but I know how the media is though about reaching out. Will help with students, the print media, as well as the and most of you guys are near some major cities. Even if you don't live in them, you're nearby enough. But You can reach out to the news people themselves, the reporters. There's all kinds of people at the stations that you can reach out to. And then the other problem is that, well, okay, with you guys working, the problem that you face in some of these courses is that some of the things you do, you have to do them during the day. If you're working during the day, you have to do what I always had to do, and that's just take some time and stuff like that off. Work with the schedule with who you're working with and get it done. So there's all kinds of ways to get this thing done. A few people have done that in this class and in other classes I've taught. So it is one of the challenges that students have had. Let me see, respond to the chat box here. Says I'm trying every medium platform, colleges, yeah, working horrible and asking you to email and not pop in. You know, depends on who you're reaching. See, maybe it's where you are too. I think you're in the Boston area, right? Is it Boston, Massachusetts area anyway? Uh, so yeah, you don't even have to rely on the. You can rely on the national ones. You that are people who instead you have staff people that can help, and so it's a problem. It's a problem. So you know. The state police, I'm sure, in every agency, I know in our state, the state police is very friendly about helping the county police, as well as the local police departments in some of these small towns in Chicago are really, really helpful when it comes to reaching students. And if they didn't know how, if you're in Illinois and you had a problem, yeah, Boston, just like I said, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, it is. It is persistence and hard work. But you're working with people who are under the gun and the fire. But you got to remember, like I said again, it may not be the person that you want to work with, but you know, and I know a whole lot of media people personally, and I tell you this too. Excuse me. There are some people who are retired media people who are good people to reach out to. So, because if anyone had any in Chicago area that they needed to reach, I could get you in just like that, bam, in Chicago. But Boston and New York and California and Florida and Texas and other places, Minnesota. Though I know people who are in my family up there who connected with the media up there. So anyway, just one of the challenges that you run across in terms of trying to get these assignments done. That's why I always tell students from week one, try to be as act like week one is week 5 or week 6. So and then the last thing you can do is the blogs. The blogs are using straight up question and answers from the internet. Those are the final choices, and usually students who end up doing those, they let me know that that was it. They had no other choice. But it's hard trying to. The idea of doing this is trying to get it done as close to the weeks that you can, so you can get the grades that you need. So anyway. And also one of the things I think that they might try to consider working on with our advisory boards, because we have people on our advisory board from here who work with students all across the country. that are police officers, uh, correction officers. We don't have any media people that we deal with, but like I said again, there are ways to do that. So anyway, let's get to the calendar. Where's calendar? Here we go. All right. One of these days, they'll give me an alternate method to help students who are in problems like yours, but they haven't done that as of yet. Matter of fact, they're thinking about redoing this whole course, which I thought they were going to be doing already before they gave it to me again. So anyway, this is the schedule or where we are today. Then your reply posts are due this Saturday. And then your written assignments are due this Sunday, the 9th. Again, when it comes to the course project, I'll be as flexible as I can up to, I can't go beyond the 16th, but that's it. So I will be as flexible to help you guys out and try not to penalize you, but I can't go beyond the 16th. That's a rule there. So that's it for that week. So remember, once again, okay, everybody will. I'm glad. I know you will. So don't worry about it. Don't get on any cliffs or nothing like that. Don't say I'm toast. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, there's a move right there. The district attorney has um, an officer that makes public comments. We have one here. The young lady who handled the what do you call it? Not Trayvon Martin, but the Jesse Smollett case here in Illinois. I knew her personally, and you know she did a really good job of doing that. So the district attorney or prosecutor has that kind of thing. So anyway, I'm rambling, so I'm trying to move on here. So that's your calendar, as you can see, and you see again that a week from Sunday is it. So you got assignments all next week. We'll, of course, see each other next week for the final lecture on the 11th. That other class I told you, their class actually ends on the 11th. So that's a 5.5. So you guys have full 6 weeks. So now let's get into the module itself. First, let's take a look at the assignments. Okay, so impartial trials. And then there's an article that this assignment is based upon. And as you know, there's no textbook here. So what they did was, there was a textbook, and the textbook is out of print. So what they did was, excuse me, they took the articles from the textbooks that used to exist and included them in the course. And this is one of the good ones. So the whole idea, it speaks in terms of the title, the betrayal of the First Amendment's purpose. So the question is trial by media actually facilitating the First Amendment or not? That's pretty much the essence of what they're asking you to do, and you can glean that from what they're asking. So in a 1 to 2 page paper, you're going to address, when the media broadcasts a live criminal trial, how does it affect the defendant's Sixth Amendment right to an impartial jury? You should have some pretty good ideas about that from, if recalling my lecture I did on the O.J. Simpson case, because it is exactly what one of the things that happens. And so there's some good points that you should be aware of in terms of that. We'll talk about that just a little, but I've talked about that, and if you refer back to that lecture, you will recall exactly what I said about that. When a jury of our peers is selected from the jurisdiction of the case, Does the media information given to jurors help determine the outcome of the case? Why or why not? Once again, I kind of addressed that issue as well. And so when a jury is selected, does the media information affect the outcome of the case? That's the whole question. So that's putting it another way, but I did address that. And of course, it depends on the kind of judge that's involved. But anyway, number 3, identify how this media information affects the jury members. And you got to remember, when reading the media information that's in this article, how it affects the jury members, you got to remember possibly when they could have come in contact with it. If they came in contact with it before being selected as jurors, then it could affect it. If not, then there's some guidelines that you guard against them even reaching that stage. And I don't have to go into those because I covered those in detail as well. And then I want you to list a minimum of 3 issues related to the general public knowing about the case details, the suspect, the witnesses, and prior to trial, can they remain unbiased? Why or why not? I have theories on all of that, and I'll talk a little bit about that tonight. As a defense attorney and having been on the prosecution side, when I did my prosecution cases, I didn't have juries because they were local cases, but I've been the attorney, of course, on the other side. So then let's see what I put in here, the rubric to remind you of what you need to do, and that is usually the 80th percentile involves making sure that you provide these things. So you get 20 points for the first part, 20 points for the second part, and then 40 points for the last part. And then, of course, 1 to 2 page minimum, double space, you know all that stuff. I'm not going to go over that. And then your APA stuff, that's standard there. And you know how I grade using that. I grade the same way if I use the rubrics in other courses that you've had with me. Except, well, yeah, contemporary issues in criminal justice, I did the same thing. That's J355. Many of you were in that class with me last quarter. Okay, so that's that. And then your discussion, the media coverage of the Trayvon Martin. How do I feel the media influence the public's opinion of Zimmerman? Also explain how you feel the media influenced the public's opinion of Martin. You know, speaking of that last assignment that you had to do, the Trayvon Martin is a good case to use for the answers to this, the written assignment, some of these questions. And I personally just giving you a little tip of the iceberg, know and believe without a doubt that the media coverage had a whole lot to do with the outcome of the case. And the individuals who were ultimately selected as jurors were already, what I use, prejudiced based upon the information that the news media provided to them, so that there was nobody who was going to actually hear that case that didn't know a lot of critical things, which are a little different from the O.J. Simpson case, because, like I said again, all the media had a chance to do with the O.J. Simpson case is to expose the flaws of the law enforcement agencies that fumbled the ball in that case. I stand on it solidly because it was what it was, and a lot of you guys younger, you don't know that because of what you might hear. But that movie that they did, one of the movies they did, that series with Courtney Vance playing Johnny Cochran, was a pretty good depiction. But my point being is that in that case, the media didn't affect the jury. because they were sequestered well in advance concerning what was happening, and then the evidence that really got the jury to acquit that man was the evidence that was presented by the prosecution, and how they pointed out the holes that were in the defense, rather, in the prosecution case, how Johnny Cochran eloquently leading that team, along with Epley Bailey, along with drawing a blank on him, but the DNA guy, but all of these guys, that whole dream team, they were the ones, and the media just showed you what they did, and so. But anyway, on the other hand, the Trayvon Martin case was totally different, because some of the feelings that's a reality in the criminal justice system. Unfortunately, that's the situation with the world today. I talk to you guys about diversity and inclusion as one of our transferable skills, and the fact that I'm on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, I was very appalled by something I saw on the news today, and this goes to what I'm about to state, is that I saw, I think it was a guy, a Mexican immigrant who came to this country many years ago, did well, has restaurants, and his son was the subject of being mistreated, and in an open meeting that was there at the school, a Caucasian gentleman was sitting behind him, says, well, why don't you go back to Mexico or something, he said. And everybody of all races turned around, and they were appalled by that. That is ridiculous. But here's the point, and I'm trying to get people to understand, is that unfortunately, people still harbor those kinds of things in their minds in dealing with the criminal justice system, from law enforcement, from all the way down to where we get to the point to the jurors, where we're talking about right now. Unfortunately, it's a sad commentary, but it is one of the realities that we all must understand and operate. And so I'm a person who, I like everybody except people that don't bleed red blood. And I want them to go back to wherever they came from if they don't bleed red blood. And so somebody says, oh, Professor Wright said, I says, you didn't even hear the whole statement. The statement is the truth, because we all bleed red blood, regardless of where we're from. But the point of the matter is, on the coverage of the Trayvon Martin case, unfortunately, the system that is involved there. One other issue I will say, and I move on in terms of the Trayvon Martin case, is that I have seen and been doing some studies since I've been a professor, and I've had a number of students who are from Florida, and many of you are, and the tenor in the state of Florida is not so good for, and I have to say it because of what I see that's been taking place, is there's some racial issues that African American males, young males, face. And I've talked to some African American males who, and Hispanic males and females that want to be law enforcement in the state of Florida, and they have expressed that and want to leave the state. I got one young man, particularly, he's ready to leave Tampa because of what his mom went through as a police officer there. And I think I talked about this in another class. So anyway, the influence that the media coverage does is one thing, but then we start to talk about the racial aspects of it. And so we have to recognize this is a academic uh, area that we're in education, we must bring in reality about what we really see. And there, let's see what it's saying here. Let's see. Okay, it says spoke with the lieutenant about my LTC. Was denied and said that domestic violence victims shouldn't have a firearm. I don't know what that. He tells me that the law. I don't know what this is about. What that's about. So you'll have to talk to me outside of class about that. LTC. Who's the LTC? Oh, of course. Yeah, yeah. Okay, you're talking about the. Okay. In other words, the stereotypes is what you're saying. That's the kind of thing. Is that what you're talking about? Oh, well, that happens. All those types of things happen. But I'm saying all of this to say this is that we have to operate in a vacuum. No, we operate in the real world about where we come. So anyway, so what are the pros and cons of the media involvement in this case? And so then let's get to the final paper. You know now what you've been doing, what you've been putting together, and your final paper is due. A 5 to 7 page. Remember, it's double space. Supported by the interviews you've conducted from the two different sources, and you completed the rough draft already. I haven't had a chance to look at your rough drafts, but I'm going to try to grade your rough drafts in the next day so that I can make sure that you don't have to skip around to get to those. And writing a paragraph, and don't list the questions and answers in bullet form, but in a minimum of 3 in-text citations of the person you're interviewing. So that's important. I talked about that already in the other weeks. No reference page is needed unless you use outside sources. Listen, don't get comfortable with that statement. I hate they put that even in there. I encourage reference sources to support your statements that are contained in your paper. I don't like that statement at all. And then be sure to provide an explanation of your results. And of course, you know APA is the requirement. And then your live lecture key phrase. So again, going to the rubric. The rubric kind of breaks it down the way that you get your points. Include a minimum of 3 in-text citations and quotes from the interviewee. So you'll get your 55 points for that. Contain explanation of the results. So that's a total of 105 of the points. That's them. Then you got to deal with the right number of pages, 5 to 7 pages in terms of your assignment. Let me say this to you, and I keep saying this to students, that the requirements for pages is not to say that we want you to do so many pages, but what we want you to unconsciously be aware of while you're doing these assignments is gathering data and information so that you get what I call an uninformed person who could pick up your paper and totally almost get what you went through in terms of getting the information or sharing the information. That's what and it takes usually that amount of time to do that. And then, of course, this is your APA formatted as well, okay? Now, the reference part that only applies to the interview portion, but if there's some other sources that you should have come across that confirm the topic or area that you're working in, then please, by all means, include those. All right? And of course, that's due Sunday, but I told you, I says I will give you some leeway in terms of getting that done because of the challenges that it has nothing to do with me not grading week week 5 before that, but it has to do more with your, because I'm going to, like I said again, try to do your week 5s right away so that we can get you up to speed on what you need to do for the final. So those are your assignments. Any questions about the assignments? Okay. All right. I think I see everybody said that they're up to speed. Okay. All right. So now let's get into the topic here for the week. And let's go into the right to know. As you already know, the First Amendment provides the right of the media in terms of covering criminal cases, and that the public has the right to know that tangentially affect the First Amendment right of reporters, but also to be aware of what's happening in their communities, locally, nationally, and so forth, to know what's going on in their country, city, state, and so forth. So we deal with the right to a fair trial and that kind of thing. So we're going to talk about the media and active investigations, and that'll give me a chance to talk about a few things. Okay, so we're going to, this little section here is where we're going to spend the rest of our time. So as I said, that the Constitution gives the media the right to inform the public about what's going on in their communities, and then the citizens who are defendants have a right to a fair and unbiased jury trial of our peers and are innocent until proven guilty. You know, I say this to you with all due respect, that it's a good theory, innocent until proven guilty, but you've probably heard me say this, and you will continue to hear me say it, is that actually in application, it is not that. It is more like guilty until proven innocent, and that's the case. And unfortunately, you will find that that is how it applies in terms of if you are ever a criminal defendant, you will find that to be the case. And so, as a result of the realities of the mind of people, you can't, as we say in criminal cases, when a statement is made in court and the individual is allowed to make a statement, and then the attorney for whichever side, whether it's defense or the prosecution, objects, and then the judge's ruling is sustained, which means that the person who made the objection has won, and the judge will then sometimes turn to the jurors and say, disregard what you just heard. Well, in reality, unless you performed a lobotomy, you're not going to be able to take that out. And human beings actually don't have the capacity to remove those kinds of things that will affect them and stay in their minds during the course of that trial, because that's a short-term thing, maybe years later even. But certainly, you know me, if I'm in, that's why they would never let me on juries, is because my photographic memory is, no, they don't want that, because I'll be able to play the tapes back and forth. But the point of the matter is that unfortunately, the prosecution has the easiest job, but the defense is the one who has the tough job. So, and that's the way it actually applies. That's not how we as defense attorneys were trained to look at it, but we were also taught to recognize the realities of it. So anyway, just saying that right up front. So with the Constitution protecting the rights of both parties, there has to be something that's done to protect the individual who's on trial, and something that allows the First Amendment rights to go forth, such as not blocking out the case. Can you imagine a case of the magnitude of orange juice? We call him orange juice. O.J. Simpson, which really his name was Orenthal James, and the O.J. Simpson case without the media coverage. Well, I'm not talking about during the trial. I'm talking about during the trial. So the issue of media coverage before the trial is something that affects jurors before they're selected. But my point is that once you get to trial and you're able to see what the evidence is that's presented by both sides, can you put aside the thing that you already felt beforehand? In other words, can you be one of the kind of people that, or are you one of these kind of people that even if I show you something is right, you still are going to stick with your belief? That's a bad thing. I know people who, and I'm talking about in general, not just in criminal cases, who once their position is taken, you can't change their position because they're like a pit bull, like a vice grip, holding on to whatever it is they want to hold on to, even if it's determined that it's a lie. So unfortunately, that's part of reality, and it does creep into our criminal justice system. So meanwhile, here as we sit on a jury trial, the question is, can we allow media coverage to influence our decisions? Should we? Of course not. But do we? Yes, because we're human beings. However, as it says here, we must maintain a balance and be as unbiased as the facts are presented of a trial. That's what I've been saying all along. And that's one of the critical things that you need to examine and be aware of. There are very few people who in a high-profile case will be straddlers of the fence. You're either guilty or not guilty. But in the reality, as a lawyer, a defense lawyer, if you're straddling the fence, that's a not guilty. But the point of the matter is that fact of the matter is that we need to remain unbiased, not just about that, but about anything that we're dealing with. Go into things with an open mind. So anyway, it says this can often prove difficult as the media bombards the public. And that's what I was talking about a few minutes ago. Just bam, bam, bam. You heard me refer to the Sam Shepard case. If you ever have a chance to go and check that out, do some research, you'll see that that was one of the cases that comes to mind that I studied many years about how, and it turned into a movie. I forgot the name of the movie, and a TV series called Petrocelli years and years ago. And it was all about a doctor who allegedly killed his wife, and he was found guilty of killing his wife. But the media circus was so bad on it that it reached the stage where it was important for the Supreme Court ultimately to look at it and say there's no way under the circus, that's what they refer to as a circus-like atmosphere. I mean, they were like camped outside the man's house. They were all over the place. And so the public had a chance to see those. and there was no way in the world that anyone could have had a fair trial. So it wasn't based upon any type of evidence that was uncovered. It was based upon the way that the media reported. And that's irresponsible media coverage. And the Supreme Court correctly decided that in the case. If you want to, give me a second here. I have it here. Let's see. I have it. I'm going to give you some place you can find it, and you'll want to look at that one. Okay. Yeah. He was a neurosurgeon. He was said he was exonerated in '66 after having been convicted of a '54 murder of his wife. And you can find out this happened in Ohio, I believe it was, but his name is Sam Shepard with 2 P's. And they did movies and videos and other things of that nature. But it was overturned by the United States Supreme Court because of the public cases. But it's one of the famous cases that you could find. So take a look at that, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so the media's influence. So our legal system is based on due process, and you and I already know what that is, but just to remind you, it simply means that the Constitution says you have a right to face your accusers, you have a right to know what the specifics of the charges are that are against you in written form. You have a chance to what we call discovery, what evidence that they have, and they're supposed to turn that over to you so that you can determine how you can respond to it. And and then it says that due process also provides that everyone is innocent until proven guilty. That is a theory, once again, and the question is how much do we actually put that theory into action? And that's what I spent my years as a defense attorney doing pretty well with. My jury verdicts were in the high 90s of not guilties because I was able to get it quite clear using the theory of innocent until proven guilty and the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt by just focusing that if your brain believes just a little bit, and I used to do this, you can see me in front of the jury, right close to them, not up in their faces, but if you believe just a little bit, and there's no space between my fingers, that person might not have done it, or it might not, you got to let them go. Man, it was so effective. They used to call it the Wright illustration. And the point matter is that when I would say it, but then I was known, they said, oh, here goes that hand. Yes, it does do that. And that's where it's supposed to work. So so a question for us is, could this be a reason why the media presents what they believe is right or wrong? For example, consider the new form of media reporters. Like you have people like Nancy Grace. How many heard of Nancy Grace? You all heard of Nancy Grace? Sure, everybody in this room has heard of Nancy Grace. Yeah. What do you think about Nancy Grace? Any thoughts or opinions before I tell you mine? Okay. Anything else? Anybody else? What about her thoroughness? Do you find her to be very thorough? Do you find her to be fair? Yeah. Okay. What you just painted was the typical picture of the media reporters of today. She's like the poster child, Nancy Grace is. And depending on what side you're on, uh, so somebody said, and this is what somebody said. I don't know how true it is. They said Nancy Grace, because she has her own TV series, a TV show. She's not just working for a station as an independent media reporter. She actually has her show, and that there are some considerations about people like that who has sponsorships that I'll just stop there and you can fill in the blank yourself, that has something to do with how they conduct their activities. Do you think that's possible? Do you? Okay, I'll answer it then. Yeah, it is. It is very possible because of the fact that uh, some decisions can be affected by that. And people say, that you're very cynical, Dr. Wright. I says, no, I'm cynical. I'm real because of the fact that I've worked in the media and very familiar with how the media operates. I'm familiar with how newsrooms operate, how editors put together these things. I've been in meetings where I've watched them cover a story as a team and put it together. And I've also, as I say, having been a lawyer in court, not necessarily with those very same cases, but watched some of those things. And I can tell you quite honestly that yes, there are some things that do sway. It's supposed to be that whoever operates your station is not supposed to uh, put you out there and tell you what to do and say, such as there's been allegations about Fox. Um, CNN is supposed to be the station that's a little more liberal. Fox is, and they line it up by parties and by whether people is conservative or liberal, those kind of things. But anyway, people like Nancy Grace are supposed to be what we call investigative reporters. My definition of an investigative reporter, a true investigative reporter, is someone who's there to gather the information from all aspects, not to have a conclusion before they do that, and then in the process of gathering that information, tie it together so that it makes sense to the public. Now, you know what that sounds like? What the attorneys do. That's what we do. That's what defense attorneys, that's what prosecutors do. So people like Nancy Grace are like that. Now, I remember when I was a criminal defense lawyer, and I was dealing with one high-profile case that I had, one of my last ones. I already knew stuff on the inside that the media later brought out, but it didn't matter because of the fact that I already knew it was so bad that this was one of the times that I took my client and pled him guilty. But he didn't take the deal, and he was found guilty later on by a jury. But the point of the matter is, and I don't even count that as part of my 90 percentile because I already advised him that it was in the best interest that he plead guilty. But the media stuff that came out, there were people who later on came to me and they says, "Did you know this?" I said, "I did." And so they said it didn't come out in trial. I says, because the way that I conducted my questioning in the trial, I didn't open up a can of worms or to make it worse because I knew it was already a pretty bad situation. So attorney has to be smart to recognize in reality what kind of case that they have in front of them. So so this out of media could impede on the right to due process. Some have said, though, on the other hand, that some of the information that comes out of people like Nancy Grace helps a defense attorney. But usually, if the information that comes out from people like Nancy Grace, and there's a couple other TV shows that are out there that involve that, you will be helped because of the fact that you, as the defense attorney, control the investigation that takes place. Long before people like Nancy Grace, there are people like myself who had investigators. Then you got also people who are lawyers, who are almost like they're media people, and they are media figures, and they like to come and be involved in cases, and just because they're involved in a case, that performs the public opinion. Does anybody know an attorney that might fit that mold? I have one particular one in mind off the top of my head. Is a female from California who goes everywhere in the country, and she pops up everywhere. Anybody know who I'm talking about? How many people heard of Gloria Allred? You ever heard of Gloria Allred? No? Anybody else heard of Gloria Allred? Oh gosh, you got to get out. Gloria Allred. Google it or look it up. Her name is Gloria. Let's see. Let me make sure I got it. But it's Gloria. Let me type the A. As soon as I type the A for Gloria, her face pops up. And she's an attorney. Says oftentimes she's known for taking high profile and controversial cases, particularly those involving protection of women's rights. She's the one that was involved in the Harvey Weinstein case. She was involved. I think she was involved in the Cosby case. But she does civil as well as dealing with criminal. But take a look at Gloria Allred, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And then you've seen her. You just probably didn't recognize her. But she's a Nancy Grace type person, but she does civil as well as criminal. So the point of the matter is, because I got to keep moving on because I'm a little over, but I want to finish this section here, is that how much influence does this have on the public? Well, when it's all cut and dry and said and done, the public perception is one thing. The key thing is how does it affect those on a jury. So if I'm involved in a jury selection and I'm dealing with a, quote, high-profile case, and I know that Gloria Allred is involved, and she's not one of the attorneys in the case. She may not even be one of the attorneys in the courtroom, but she's one of the ones that are familiar. One of the questions I would ask jurors in my voir dire, or what we call right to question jurors, to get to the truth about what jurors think, is are you familiar with Gloria Allred? And the answer is yes. As soon as they tell me yes, then it's only so far we can go with our questioning, depending on the judge. But the bottom line is that right there is a red flag for me. So anyway, the point of the matter is that so the answer is yes. They can affect the public perception. People are often attracted to wrongdoings and challenges to our system, and this helps drive the media to influence public perception. Well, that's because they always say that the public wants to know the bad things happening around them. That's what that's all about. So we have to understand, says that yet sometimes the media can manipulate and lead the public into assumptions about a person's guilt or innocence. That's what we've been talking about this whole session, is that the media can do that. And so, again, when you get into the instance where you have a judge who will utilize things like gag orders that will not allow you to talk about a case, or to involve yourself with sequestering of the jury, as you know about that in the O.J. Simpson case and many other cases, where with sequestering the jury is kept out of media sight and away from people who are not involved in the case. So there's only so much that the judge can do, but the judge has to be very, 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 very protective. And also, at one time, they've changed that there were no cameras in the courtroom. But now there are cameras in the courtroom. But what's very interesting is that there are cameras in the courtroom, but do you not know that in most courthouses now, I know it used to be different, but now it's, excuse me, now is that you cannot bring your cell phones in. And the reason for that is because every one of these things now has a video recorder in it, and they don't want you recording stuff. But it's interesting because that's what the media is doing all the time, but they don't want you to be able to do it. So they say it's about something about maintaining control in the courtroom. If you are ever aware of the fact that with cameras in the courtroom, if you've ever been in a courtroom where cameras are there, it's not like a TV studio. You don't see the cameras up close or nothing like that. They have them so that it's a regular courtroom, but the cameras are farther away, and the way that they have them built in. And now they're building courtrooms now with the cameras systems already in them, so that they can videotape, and so they can live stream, and so they can broadcast cases straight from court. So how we conclude here with how the media reporting affects investigations. So the question is, does the media affect law enforcement investigations? Does it cause law enforcement people to do their jobs better? Does it cause law enforcement people to go beyond their jobs? Does it really provide a protective measure? Well, when he started talking about things like we were talking about missing children, then the media, is very helpful in terms of dealing with those kind of things, helping law enforcement to find those children. But also, the media is good for opening up investigations on what we call cold cases, cases that are found where individuals are found to have been closed the cases, but they find newly discovered evidence, brings it to the prosecution, and it goes to the courts and reopens a case. Also, in media is also good at dealing with some of the things that my alma mater, Northwestern, wrongful conviction program has been involved with, and that is to utilize technology like DNA to bring out evidence that a person could not have committed an offense that they were charged with. So it's almost like the question of how you use the tool. Do you use a car to race and speed down regular streets, or do you drive within the law to get you where you have to go, and those kind of things? So it's the same thing that people find themselves in terms of this. So dealing with, again, unsolved crimes, the media can help a whole lot. But then if the media is very zealous, then the media can hurt investigations. That's why you have what we call PIOs, public information officers, who control the information concerning an investigation that's released to the media. And that's what that's all about, to make sure that during the course of an investigation, even to the newspaper people that the police officers themselves who are investigating the case should not do anything to jeopardize the investigation, because it can ultimately end up creating a opening for us defense attorneys to use at trial. And we have had times, and I did, where I've called media people to the stand. I'm talking about radio people, a couple of TV people, newspaper people, and asked them about their information. So anyway, there's a good article here, polygraph keys versus publicity serial murder relations. So you can take a look at that on your own to deal with the media and police investigations. Finally, this is a good one. Considering that criminal offense is active, as you learn about the Watergate scandal, which is something that you guys don't know anything about firsthand, that ultimately is the where there's actual some criminal activity and political, and led all the way to the President of the United States at that time, who was Richard M. Nixon, and ultimately he was impeached. But before the finding in the Senate, even though the articles of impeachment were out, he resigned, and Spiro Agnew became President of the United States. So if you study the Watergate scandal, and it says a crucial piece of evidence that the police are using to gain real hard evidence against the accused, if the media reviews information on items such as shoe prints and stuff like that used in commission of the case, that's not so cool. If you go back and recall stuff like what you didn't hear about things like this in the O.J. Simpson case. Where did you hear it? You heard it from the stand, and that's where you're supposed to hear that kind of information. So it says the suspect can tamper with the evidence or damage the evidence beyond proof, as what happened in the O.J. Simpson case. It wasn't the suspect, it wasn't O.J., it was the police, and how they did a really bad job of collecting the evidence so that it damaged the evidence of being used, such as those shoes, the glove, and several other things. And so there's a whole lot of issues about how this works. So the final statement that I'm going to make is what it says here. For this reason, the police remain cautious of releasing facts to the media, while the media continues to seek out facts. So the media is trying to find out stuff, but law enforcement is saying, I can't give you that because it will jeopardize, or it doesn't. You hear the phrase ongoing investigation, and what that simply means, it's a way of protecting the evidence. So it's like we're in a world where we're stuck with these things, but we need responsible people. Some really good people to talk to that I know about. There are two schools that have really good students to talk to about that. Is my alma mater, Northwestern University School of Law, the Medill School of Journalism, as well as Columbia College of Chicago. I think also someone told me there's one in California, either at USC, UCLA, but these colleges, there are teams of individuals who are dealing with this, who are journalism majors, and that's what they're good for, dealing with these kinds of issues and things like that. So specifically closing out and talking about the Trayvon Martin trial, again, there is the final thing I want to say about that case is that the thing that I was unhappy about is that it was clear from the evidence that what's his name, George Zimmerman, was told not to pursue, and he did pursue, and then he ended up shooting and killing the young man Found out later he didn't have any weapons. He had some Skittles and some sodas or something like that. But what the person's perception was of what he felt that because he had a hoodie on and all of that. That's what I'm talking about, guys. Is that whether it's in Florida or anywhere, it's a bad thing because there are assumptions based upon those and individual. And so, as you probably have been able to discover, is that though George Zimmerman was acquitted of murder, I think he was found guilty of manslaughter, second degree. The bond is he got out. And anybody know what happened to George Zimmerman after he got out? Did you ever hear his name again? Anybody finally, as I conclude this? You ever heard anymore? What about you, Imelda? You ever heard the name? Yeah. He was in the media several times after that for domestic and for other crimes of so-called violence after that. Yeah, go research George Zimmerman, and then you'll see what I'm talking about. My point is that it was a person who got off in the system there because of the way the media reported this thing, and that as a result, it found lighter sentence. How about Casey Anthony? You all know about the Casey Anthony case. Oh yeah. Do you think the media shaped that case? Yeah. Do you think the media shaped it? They absolutely did. Absolutely did. And it's really sad because that woman killed her child. She killed her child. I know she killed her child because of I've listened to all the different things that happened. But you just can't. You got children. If you have children, if you don't have children, you know people who have children. The point of the matter is think about it. Defenseless children. It's crazy. It's crazy. And so that right there, Casey Anthony, is an example of how the media influenced a case as well. So anyway, you look at this, and so where are we, people? We're in a world where we're not going to get away from the media. The media is still going to be covering and providing. And so I am going to terminate this session. Let me stop sharing this. Okay, so I appreciate you guys coming out. The video is a little longer. That's because we have another session in there earlier, but I appreciate you all sticking in with me. I'm getting weaker by the second, but I got to do some grading before I stop tonight, and then earlier tomorrow, get an early start. So any questions or comments? Okay. Okay. Well, I just have one statement to make, and that is media coverage. That's what I want you to give me for your points. I'll say it one last time. Media coverage. That's what I want. So I hope that you are enjoying this class. I like teaching it because it's a you're welcome. It's a course that allows you to see realities of what's happening behind the scenes, and why stuff, as we say, gets screwed up, why there's innocent people going to jail, why there are guilty people walking the streets, and those kinds of things. So what do? We take that and we learn how to, as I said already, ethical, educated, and professional in terms of your operation. And that'll start to fix that. But not every professor teaches that way. But I'm Mr. Wright. That's it. So, you guys have a good week. I'm going to be getting some rest in about another hour or two, and I'll see you next week unless you decide to come by and visit my class tomorrow night. So the one that we started already. Good night, guys. Have a good one, and thanks again for all your expressions of prayers and helping me deal with this um, battle with this flu. It is really a terrible thing. So good night.